Okay, everybody. Oh, hey, that's a weird echoey sound, isn't it? It is 3:02, and now that everybody's here, let's get started. We'll call this meeting of the July 16th Architectural Advisory Committee to order. If we could ask everyone to please silence any cell phones or electronic devices that you have, that would be most helpful and respectful. And if we could ask the planning director to please give us a roll call.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Member Dosi?
Present.
Member Jakeway?
Present.
Member Lockyer?
Present.
Member McCoy?
Present.
Member Rotman?
Present.
Vice Chair Cassidy?
Present?
And Chair Song is excused. We have a quorum.
Great, thank you. Could we have a report, please, on the posting of the agenda?
The agenda was posted on Thursday, July the 12th. This meeting has been noticed and posted in accordance with state law.
Super, thank you. Does the committee have any revisions to the agenda?
Mr. Chair, before you go over any revisions, I just want to note that there is a City Council subcommittee meeting in this room starting at 6 p.m. We've been asked to finish our business by 5:30 if we could, so just be aware of that relative to today's agenda.
Super, okay. Since we have, I think, four items, they're all unfinished business. So since we're not seeing anything for the first time, let's see if we can try and give everybody a half hour, and then we have a little pad at the end to go over if we need it. So we'll try and be respectful of everybody's time there. Okay, so any revisions to the agenda from the committee? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to accept the agenda for today?
I move we accept today's agenda.
Second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Super. Since this is a public meeting, audience members are permitted and encouraged to comment on any issue that is within this committee's purview. Comments on an item appearing on today's agenda are made at the time that that item is presented. If you want to speak on an item that is not on today's agenda, you may speak now. Each speaker will have 3 minutes. Anybody want to speak on items not on today's agenda? All right, seeing none, then we will move along. So let's proceed to the meeting minutes from our last meeting. Actually, I think we don't have the July 2nd meeting yet.
Correct, we don't. And on the June 18th minutes, we don't have a necessary quorum to approve those minutes. So we'll continue those to our next meeting in September.
All right. So I think we are ready to move on then. Oh, okay. Actually, we didn't do a vote on accepting today's agenda. Can I, or did we did?
Yes,
we did.
you already voted on the acceptance of the agenda.
Right.
No
Okay.
action is needed on the consent calendar as we
Right.
don't have a quorum for that
Right,
item.
okay, thank you. Then let's move on to the first item on the agenda under unfinished business, item number 2, the Woodbridge Pacific Group application. Could we have a staff report on that one, please?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and members of the AAC. So for those of us that were here at the meeting of June 18, 2018, this item was presented to the AAC. It is for the installation of an interim landscape plan along the perimeter of the Cameron project. So when this item was brought before you on the 18th, staff had 4 recommendations to you relative to the height of the tubular steel fence, the type of the variety of landscaping or the planting that were proposed. And so the AAC took the item, reviewed it, and made several comments to the application to the applicant. I made a list of those 7 comments and recommendations that the AAC provided to the applicant and asked this item to be brought by before you. So it is before you again today. Those comments and recommendations made by the AAC have been implemented, although there is still one more recommendation that staff is going to ask the AAC to maintain. That is to add 24 box gallon to the trees that are being proposed. As far as the rest of the recommendations and the comments made by the AAC relative to the placement of boulder, additional shrubs, all of those have been proposed, and there are more details that has been provided on this plan. So as a result of that, and based on that, staff is going to be recommending that the AAC recommend approval of this interim landscape plan to the Director of Planning Services. So on the board, the exhibit you see now is the overall landscape or the overall site that has the landscaping on the perimeter and especially on the wash where the tubular cell fence is going to be. There has been adequate or there has been additional details provided on that. So you can see it on this exhibit. It is also part of the exhibit that has been provided to the AAC. Before I conclude my staff report, I just want to remind the AAC that we spent a considerable amount of time on this project the last time around, so I will strongly recommend that we focus our attentions mostly or largely on the comments that you made the last time around as to whether those have been implemented in the revised plan or not. Because you did, in the last meeting, you made the comment that it was in the right direction except for those 7 items that needed to be included in the plan. You also recommended to the applicant to look at the possibility of installing a permanent wall on the northern part of the site. The applicant also did that, and in the end concluded that at this point, because this is temporary, they would rather go with a tubular steel fence. And additional landscaping is being proposed along those fencing, as you can see on this exhibit there. So that will conclude my staff report. The applicant is here. If you have additional questions, staff will answer those, but if not, the applicant is here to make a presentation as well to you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I might also add, because we have a different makeup in the members of the AAC who reviewed this, what I would ask the committee to do today is to focus your comments solely on those items that were brought up by the AAC at the last meeting. And so with that, we'll go ahead and turn that back over to you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Edward, as well. Any questions for staff from the committee? Please.
What is the schedule that this interim perimeter landscaping and fence material will be in place?
Oh, okay. So according to the agreement with the City Council, they had to start construction by September 1st.
And roughly, could they have a couple-year build-out for their phasing?
I will defer that question to the applicant. I don't know that schedule.
Other questions? Please.
Edward, the plan here calls out just 15-gallon trees. Did you say in your report they've now agreed to put in some 24-gallon?
No, that we included a condition of approval that
Okay.
they mix those with 24.
And then as I look at the fence on the north side, is the landscaping I see, is it just bougainvillea that's on the fence?
It's going to be bougainvillea, and I think there will be birds of paradise also.
Thank you.
So,
It looks like just bougainvillea.
Sorry, can I just get a clarification on that? So the condition is for 100% of those trees to be 24-inch box?
no, to have a mixture of 24 and 15.
Gotcha. What's the mixture? Is it unspecified?
Arbitrarily.
Going back from the comments of the last AAC meeting where this was reviewed, it was suggested that having a mixture of both the 15-gallon and the 24-inch box would provide a greater variety of landscaping and also give us some more mature trees at installation. I would recommend that at least 50% be 24-inch box, and we'll let the AAC review and comment on that. But
Okay.
I'd say a minimum of a minimum of 50% should be 24-inch box trees.
Any other questions for staff on this one? All right, great. If I think we have the applicant here. If you would come on up and give us your name and address and any presentation that you would like to give.
Sure. My name's Todd Cunningham, 75417 Spyglass in Indian Wells. I'm the president of Woodbridge Pacific Group. We are the manager of the project. We're not the owner of the project. And as such, we are performing work out there and would be installing this landscaping and have prepared the plan for the landscaping on the perimeter. It's temporary in nature. The property's for sale. I fully expect by sometime, I can't promise, but sometime by the end of the year, this will be sold and construction will start. And we'll actually put up a typical construction fence for dust control and everything. So we'd be back to the mesh and everything while the project is under construction. This is landscaping to be in place so long as the property is sitting there, not under construction, because we do need to get solid fabric up for dust control and the like once construction starts on the interior of the project. So this is very temporary in nature, we hope, but it is the plan that we propose to put in place until such time as construction on site starts. The construction along Palm Canyon is started, and as well as a little bit of the improvements along Mesquite on the south side of the project. We did go back and identify boulder placements, which was one of the comments. We did interject a second tree species, which was one of the comments, versus having one species of tree. We did add bougainvillea along the north side, and that is all that is there. There is no bird of paradise. It is just bougainvillea, and it should grow quite rapidly. And I think that was, and then we added some shrubs in and amongst the boulder clusters at the request of the AAC. And all that is depicted on the plan, and I think we pretty much covered all the bases. As far as 24-inch box trees, personally, I don't know that you need that if we're going to tear them out 3 months after we put them in. I think that'd be a tremendous waste of money. But you know, so we wouldn't be in favor of putting 24-inch box trees in a what is a very temporary condition on that property. And if you have any questions, I'm free to answer them.
Thank you. Why don't you give us just a minute to see if we have any public comment. If anyone has any comments on this item on the agenda, now's your time to speak. You'll have 3 minutes. Anybody? All right, just a bunch of observers with smiling faces. Great. Okay, then
Mr. Chair, if I could just add, Eric Borsum, who is the president of the Tahquitz River Estates Neighborhood Organization, indicated that he wasn't able to be here. However, you did receive copies of the email that he had sent earlier, and we had also had some other email comments, I believe, that we forwarded on to you as well. So please take those into consideration as part of your deliberations.
Great, thank you. And we did receive a lot of wonderful comment the last time we saw the application, so I think we got a pretty good idea for what the neighbors' concerns were. Mr. Cunningham, if you could rejoin us up here, thank you. Never get too comfortable over there. And we'll see if anybody on the committee has questions for you.
I know that there has been a number of landscape plans presented for this particular site and project. Was there any effort that perhaps the proposed tree plan and shrub plan could be part of the overall master plan so that you didn't have to tear it out in 3 months or 6 months?
You know, this plan has trees and such planted right in front of what will be driveways and access into the homes, and plus the parkways and such in here get really tight compared to the eventual right-of-way and such versus what the condition is now. So this is all throwaway.
I was hoping that, you know, part of the original master plan could be integrated, and that way it's just adding in the future rather
Right.
than.
I think I recall asking a similar question last time, if there was any way to save anything, but it sounds like that's just not possible.
Once construction starts along the perimeter, they'd have to go. They're in the way.
And is there any way
we have to grade and do other things where all this is going to be located.
Is there any way to reuse them on the interior of the project? Basically relocating them as opposed to throwing them away?
Most of the interior project is palm trees and the like. It's not this kind of vegetation. It's all approved with the project, the architecture, and the landscape architecture, It's all approved as one plan, plan development.
So the type of plantings that would be screening well from the exterior in the temporary project just aren't the type that are going to be there on the
Correct.
interior. Okay. I jumped in with my own question. Sorry, was that all you had?
No, thank you.
Okay.
Anybody else? Please.
Why wasn't the final proposed plant species considered to be used along here?
Because the material doesn't screen as well. This is designed to screen visually from Palm Canyon and Mesquite into the site.
Okay.
I mean, vertical palm trees don't
Yeah.
screen very well.
I guess I don't know how to help with this. If there's a requirement to screen the project and it's a throwaway at 24 inch, isn't it a throwaway at 15 gallon or 36 inch or 5 gallon? Or, I mean, but 15 gallon isn't really going to screen much either. So I guess maybe it's more of a staff question. Where'd the requirement come from?
The requirement came from the city council in reviewing the extension of the subdivision improvement agreement for the property, that in order to extend the agreement, the city council wanted to see some screening and some landscaping and a decorative fence around the perimeter of the property, because we don't know how long it will be until construction starts again, and our neighbors have had to look at a construction site for much too long.
And hopefully it sells in 3 months, hopefully.
That's the intention of the owner. I'm not in control of that. But
Yeah,
yeah,
sure.
it is for sale. It's currently listed, so their intention is to sell it.
Shrubs, and that 2 types of shrub material be included in the final plan. 2 additional, yeah, varieties. The quantities may stay the same.
Second? All right, Mr. McCoy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. And if it's possible, I don't know what happens to plants that are being torn out, but maybe knowing that at some point they're going to be torn out and, quote, thrown away, maybe there's somebody else that's interested in taking them off their hands, might even come out and remove them at their own cost. So maybe that's a possibility down the line. But thank you, Mr. Cunningham. All right, moving along to item number 3, application from Pinnacle Palm Springs LLC. If we could have a staff report on that, please.
I will be recusing myself from this project.
All right, thank you.
Myself also, Mr. Chairman.
All right,
Okay. We will ask
Hopefully-
both members to step away from the table.
Yeah.
And with that, we still have a quorum to conduct business. And so I'll turn that back over to Mr. Balacker, who will be giving the staff report.
super.
Thank you, Vice Chair. This project was reviewed by the AAC previously on June 4th of this year, 2018. And at that meeting, you had several comments that I'm going to go over, and then I'll go over some slides. So the AAC recommended that the project be continued and that the project be revised to set the house back 18 feet from the front property line so that a car could park in the driveway. You requested to revise the landscape plan to remove plants that were not allowed by the CCNRs, which include palm trees. You asked for detail of the pool fencing, which they have included. You asked them to revise the color of the house. The material board is going around now, and they did darken the main body of the house a darker shade, maybe 1 or 2 shades darker. The roof was to be a tan color, which they have revised. You asked for an outdoor lighting plan on the house, which they did provide. And then you asked for an exploration of elevation changes relative to the pitched roof and the front facade. So I'm going to go through some slides. This is a revised 3D image of the house set back with the palm trees. They're still on here. The house color is not reflective of what the new paint scheme is. So they did not provide us with revised 3D images with the house color. So this is just, I'm going to go through these briefly to remind you what the house looks like and where it sets. So the site plan has been revised. You'll notice at the very top of the slide, it shows 18 feet setback from the front property line. So everything shifted south. Once again, this is a sort of a stylized drawing of the house sitting on the land and how the landscape plan would work with the different shapes and geometry there. The landscape plan has been revised to include, eliminate the palm trees that were part of the project, and now there are Palo Verde trees that have been replaced them. If I could go back one more slide, let me show you. So the pool fencing that you asked for is on this slide, and in the middle to the right, you'll see pool enclosure detail. The architect can describe that better, but my understanding is it's just steel pickets that will be placed. It'll sort of cascade down over the side of the hill. Let me get to a slide. So you'll see it here. There's a wall that goes to the west, and then the picket fence will go sort of where the rock and the DG end around that boulder and sort of down over the hill a little bit and across. There's a floor plan which hasn't changed from the last review. The building elevations haven't changed either. This plan shows the lighting that they're proposing. So they're proposing 5 can lights that'll be up in the eaves of the project and will be focused down. There's no other lighting proposed on the exterior of the house. So you'll see the front or the top is the garage and the front overhang, and then in the back where the pool will be to the bottom, and you'll see 3 lights that overhang the pool deck area. Once again, this is the color scheme that they're proposing. It's a Dunn Edwards off-white cream with a gray accent. So at the last AEC meeting, there was a discussion of the CC&Rs. There is a set of CC&Rs that were recorded in 2005, and they're included in your packet. And you'll see that there is a series of architectural guidelines that their HOA uses to evaluate these projects. In staff's opinion, they have revised the plans to meet most of those other than the paint color. Staff is recommending that the paint be darker shade or brown so that it blends in with the existing homes and in with the natural environment. We feel that we can't, when it goes to Planning Commission, we can't make the staff finding of it being harmonious and in conjunction with the surrounding neighborhood. So that concludes my report. There are additional information that you've received from the HOA today, and there's some emails that came from other residents in the neighborhood that are included. I don't know if you want to take a minute to read those, over those. And the letter from the HOA from the original denial of the project is in your packet, so that hasn't changed. So that concludes my report, and the applicant is here.
Thank you, Glenn. Any questions? Please, go ahead.
Yeah, Glenn, thank you. Would you mind maybe coming up to the slide and just show where the pool fence goes? It's a little unclear in the drawings exactly where that is.
Sure. Yes. Okay, I don't know if it's exactly on this plan. My understanding is it will continue where the wall is here, and it's this line here, and comes around. So if you remember in the 3D drawing, this is sort of like an infinity edge, sort of, and it drops off. Okay. So the fence will go down roughly 5 feet below where the edge of the pool would be.
So is it essentially going along the property line? Is that what's?
Yes.
Okay.
So it would be 5 feet below the edge of that concrete where the pool is.
Got it. Okay. And then they've introduced a new accent color, accent 3.
Right, there's the main color and accent 1 and accent 2.
And then there's, on the board, there's an accent 3.
I don't know where that goes. They'll have to address that.
Board, maybe.
No, that's the new board.
it shows a white roof.
Yeah.
The roof is tan, though.
They do, I mean, there, it shows the same color on the gate, but I'm not sure if this is on the building somewhere.
We'll have to answer that.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Glenn, I'm confused. The color board's a great example. That is different than what's in our packet. And in the packet, if you look at their elevation 4.1, it's showing 2 pitched roofs on the front of the house with a sloping clear story over the front bedroom. Then when you look at elevation 5.1, it's showing 1 pitched roof with a square clear story over. How do we know which they're really proposing?
Okay, give me a minute.
Or are these the old 4.1 and the old 5.1?
Right, I'm looking at the dates on the plan.
They're all dated May 30th,
They're all dated May 30th.
but they're different drawings.
I'll have to have the applicant reply.
Thank you.
Sean, any questions? Okay. Yeah, I was wondering the same thing. The colors don't seem to match up to what's here and what's on the board, but we'll have to ask the applicant for clarification on that. Okay, seeing no further questions, do we have the applicant here? If we could have the applicant, oh, there you are. Come on up and give us your name and address and any presentation that you'd like to give us, and we'll go from there. Howdy.
Okay, Brian Foster, P.O. Box 1573, Rancho Mirage, California.
So Brian, do you have anything to add to Glenn's presentation? We'll get to some Q&A with you after we have an opportunity to take any public comment, but if you have anything to add to the presentation, that would be great.
I think there's a little bit of confusion on the 3D render. There's just one elevation showing the front because that was the area of question. The color obviously has not been updated from a 3D perspective as of yet because we haven't settled on a color with the HOA at this point. So we're just left that neutral at this moment. But otherwise, the plans that you have should reflect the changes of the front and the lighting and all the requests that we had from the previous meeting.
Ryan, what were the changes in the elevation?
In the front elevation, there was a request to just have one sweeping roof line instead of 2 pitches, so we modified the front elevation on the previous drawing.
And does this reflect that?
No, it's the one prior to. There you go. That one, there's no more, there's not the other roof projection above that bedroom in the front.
May I ask a question?
Let's hold the questions until we do the public comment. If sounds like we're all just teeming with questions. So before I ask you to get out of the chair, do we have anybody here that would like to speak from the public on this item on the agenda? No? Okay, seeing none, you can stay right. Oh, we do have one in the back. Sorry. We have one in the back? If we have one that would like to come up and give us, so Brian, if you could take your seat for just a second. Sorry about that. And we'll take public comment from this gentleman. If you could have a seat over here and give us your name and address and take up to 3 minutes. You don't have to use it all, but you're welcome to.
Okay. My name is Mark Matthews. I live at 1745 Pinnacle Point. Actually, one of the first people that bought up there just before the market crashed. It's a fantastic community. We appreciate the work that has been done by the architect to change some of the items and whatever. I think our biggest issue still is we'd like to get kind of a color palette agreed on before we go to that. That's my current issue, but we're working together. In fact, I was just invited to go look at some other properties he's done, so we're trying to sort it out there. We really think it's an awesome time for them to build. We think it's great for Palm Springs. We have a really terrific, diverse community up there. and we just want it to fit with the hillside. That's my comment. Thank you.
Super. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. Anybody else, please? Give us your name and address and take up to 3 minutes.
Hi, I'm Lynn Lascara, and I am Mark's next-door neighbor, 1743 Pinnacle Point. And I'm in agreement with Mark that the colors don't blend in enough with the current environment up on the hill. So I'd like to see those get quite a bit darker than it is now. And would love to see how we could incorporate solar on those current roofs. Okay?
All right, super. Thank you, Lynn. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
All right, so it sounds like colors are the big question of the day. So if we could have the applicant come back up and join us. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have one more. If you would please give us your name and address.
John McCoy, 1650 Avenida Sevilla. I am also a neighbor of the project, and we're glad to see project coming in, but the colors are certainly the objection. The white rock in the landscape has not been mentioned, which if we're looking at white on the walls, white on the ground is not an appropriate statement either. The other thing that I think needs a second look is the eave lighting, perhaps on the front entry. It could work on the street side, but on the back side, as you have a roof that slopes up, facing out towards the pool, then the hillside drops off. You've got neighbors down below looking up into those lights. So perhaps as required, fully shielded lights up on the hill would be more appropriate. And then, yeah, I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you, Mr. McCoy.
Mr. Chair, I'm just going to clarify that Mr. McCoy is speaking as a private citizen and
Yes.
not as a member of the AAC. He does not have the ability to vote on this item as he is within the notification radius and has offered testimony on the item.
Thank you for that
Thank you, Glenn.
clarification.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so if we could have the applicant come back up and join us, unless there are any other comments, I don't want to miss anybody in the back. Okay, great. So, sounds like we have some questions about color. I'll see if anyone has a specific question, or we just want to hear you talk about color. Please, go ahead.
Not related to color, but related to comments I made before. I don't understand the transition between this flat pad and the pad on either side. As you look at the last rendering, it appears to show there that the pad on the left comes and has a very steep slope down to the wall. And then from the right, there's a very steep slope down to the left. Now, as I look at the site plan, it looks like maybe those are HOA. There's a strip of land on each side of your lot separating it from the neighbor lots. So are you allowed to create that slope transition off of your property but on that HOA land?
Well, I think the grading plan will be more accurate as to the conditions there. This is conceptual, what you're seeing here on the rendering.
Right, a grading plan is on the screen, but it's hard to see, it's very small, but it's in your packet also.
Yeah, it doesn't show those grades transitioning around to create a flat pad. It still shows them just coming as straight grades from the upper lot onto this lot. So it could be something that'll really come to bite everybody if suddenly they realize, where does the wall go between the lots and where do we have to transition the grade? And like I said before, I'm concerned that there's going to need to be a retaining wall protecting the upper lot. And then does your 5-foot pool fencing have to go on top of that retaining wall so suddenly we have a 10-foot high wall?
I don't think the conditions there would be that high, but clearly there would need to be a retaining wall. Looking at it from yes, on that side. There would need to be a small retaining wall, maybe 3 feet high is what I'm estimating. But that transitions to the 5-foot high or 6-foot high wall on the side.
Next subject, I think the street elevation is hugely improved. I think taking off that second roof really helped. The one thing it has done is that sliding glass door to the right is now just flat on that elevation. If that door could be inset or a little eyebrow around it, I think that could be the final thing to make it really work. But I think the one roof with the pitched clear story that shows really makes it a better project.
Great, thank you.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I'm looking at the material board. That's the old.
Right. What's in your packet is the correct material.
So this one?
Yes. But
Okay,
it's more this brown color.
gotcha, but the numbers are correct.
Yes.
Do you want to just walk us through let me ask a question. Are you responding to the neighbor's request for a darker field color from the white
Yes, we have from before we even started this project.
to this?
Worked with, on that color, that one, I believe, was also denied. So we started with white, then we went to an off-white, now we're into the tans. And ultimately, not sure where it'll end up, but it's something that we're currently working on.
So he's speaking of the HOA reviewed and denied several paint colors.
Yeah,
So what's before you today has been denied by the HOA.
yep.
So it sounds like perhaps we can give a recommendation, but ultimately it's the HOA that's going to have to approve the color choice.
What I would recommend in this situation, Mr. Chair, is that the AAC make its recommendation in terms of the project, including the choice of color. If you feel a darker shade is appropriate, or if you're comfortable with this shade meeting our architectural criteria that we have adopted in the code. If the HOA requires a much darker shade or a different color entirely, what we would do is then bring the paint colors back to you all to review and approve if it's significantly different than your recommendation. So again, even though we don't enforce HOA CC&Rs, in this particular situation, if it modifies anything differently than what you may approve, we would bring it back to you to review again.
Thank you, Flynn.
I guess, on that same note then, when I look at this material board and I see Dunn Edwards DET 6254, I'm trying to find that color on the elevations, these drawings, and I'm lost. I don't see it anywhere. And I try to find it on the 3D model, and
Well, the 3D has the original color that we first started with before any revision. So this is when we first started with white. It had, this 3D has
so
not been
let me see if I
updated.
get this
The only
correctly.
thing that's been updated is the color board and the note, and should be actually just the color board is the only thing that's been updated at this point.
So we're not able to look at the proposed color on the 3D model. We're not able to look at the proposed color on any sort of elevation.
Well,
And
we
we're
were-
supposed to make a judgment to support you on changing this color. Am I understanding that correctly?
We were hopeful to submit the colors upon approval instead of having to keep updating. It's time consuming to do this instead of wasting a bunch of time, arrive at an agreement on what the color will ultimately be, and then update the plans and submit them for,
I gotcha.
yeah.
Although that makes some sense, I feel like it's slightly wasting our time here to not show us anything that's showing what you proposed, other than this. So, having said that, have you gotten some okay or some go-ahead from the folks at the Architectural Review Board on the HOA that say that they're generally in support of this particular color?
That's on here.
Yes.
Okay.
We have not arrived at an agreement on the color at this point. We're not getting,
They've seen this, though, this latest proposed color.
yes, I believe so. I think they felt that that one's still too light.
Okay.
So what was, not to interrupt you, and sorry, okay. What was being passed up to us and around was just an actual sample color of what is on this proposal, but it doesn't, if I understand correctly, this one was not approved
That's,
as well.
it's 6254, which is what is they're asking for. If you look on there, that matches. So that's the proposed paint color.
When you say what they are asking for, being the applicant or the HOA?
The applicant.
The applicant, but this one was not approved.
None of it has been approved.
Okay, so what we should, sounds like what we should do is give all of our feedback absent of color, make that a separate subject if we want to recommend a color range, like Flynn mentioned, but let's not pick apart the color because there is no color being proposed. It'd be nice if there was one, but there's not. So let's just decide what, I'll pass that around, but that's not.
And Mr. Chair, if I might offer another suggestion,
Yeah.
perhaps, that rather than making a recommendation on the color, what you might do is defer the color selection and have that come back to the AAC at a later point in time. So that way you could approve the architecture, but have the color come back to you.
Sure, that feels good. Any further questions for the applicant, please?
I find it hard to approve the architecture when we see drawings that show different architecture. I think we should have a submittal that's the total group of updated drawings. You know, on one of the sides it shows the clear story window is pitched, and another side elevation it shows the clear story window is square. What are we approving?
The plans have, the architecturals have been updated, so those should be in your packet. It's just the 3D versions have not been updated except for this front elevation.
But I thought we had some discrepancy in the drawings that we had. Right.
This one's correct. So only the front and the side elevation changed, the other elevations didn't, so this sheet is correct here.
Which sheet number is that, please?
A-5.1.
A51 is the correct one.
I've got two different A5.1s.
Yeah, there's, in the packet, there's two A51s.
Both on.
The A51 is the old one, and then well, somehow this was the original one, so this one. So the one that has the revised front elevation is the correct version.
This one?
Yes.
So it seems like this sheet, which has A41 on one side and A51 on the other side, this is the old design.
Yes.
And so we only have an A51, which is the new design, but we don't have an updated A41.
Well, yeah, that's a good question. The A41, the other two elevations are correct, meaning the back elevation and the left side elevation. Those did not change. It is confusing.
And then, just to clarify, there's this, which one is it? There's this image, and there's this image.
That's correct. I submitted that image in your left hand, and those were the old images. Those were not resubmitted. Those were just reused, I guess, from the previous meeting
Okay.
to show the difference.
Well, can I make a recommendation that we offer any architectural feedback that we have at this point? And I may Actually, if there are no further questions for the applicant, then I will make my comment. You're good? Okay, thank you, sir. You can take your seat and we will discuss this. What I was going to suggest was, since we know we want to see it come back for color, it would be nice to have it come back with a complete package of what we're actually supposed to be approving. So if there are any comments that we have that we'd like to see come back architecturally or lighting or otherwise, maybe we make those comments and then I'll suggest a motion to continue the item to see it come back with all of those comments incorporated and an actual color that's been approved by the HOA.
I'd like to add that when we talk about color, it's not a question of lighter or darker, but it becomes a question of warmer or cooler. Because I think the issue, I'm projecting what the homeowners are concerned about. I think the issue is not so much that this color is too light. This color is perhaps not warm enough to be conducive to the desert environment. So if we have any discussion about it, I'd like to say that we talk about it being as a warmer color or a cooler color, as well as lighter and darker.
Good point. Any other comments on it? Did you have any?
Well, I think we should also talk about the comment that came from the public about the lighting.
Yes.
And as well as the rock color. But I think the rock color might be, once we settle on a building color, might work or not.
Right,
So,
and I think the rock comment incorporated the building color
Yeah.
as well.
yeah.
Yeah, certainly, I think if there's lighting that's going to be seen from below, from another neighbor, pointed roughly at them or seeing the bulbs, then maybe was a good suggestion to shield that properly. Any other comments that we'd like to see come back? And this is only my suggestion as how we handle it, but I'm seeing a lot of nods, so.
Architecturally, the comment that I made that the sliding glass door facing the street and that the garage door facing the street have some sort of an inset or setback from the plaster facade of the building, so there's a little bit of a shadow line around those.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to ask, that was a comment made during the last presentation, wasn't it?
I think it was, and
I
the big
believe so.
difference is on the last elevation, the second sloping roof provided shade over that sliding glass door, and now that it's gone, there's nothing over that sliding glass door.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else?
So are you suggesting that architectural, the window detail there maybe that wall's double framed or something and putting that window and sliders pushed
Exactly,
back into, but not on all four facades, just on the frontage?
In a perfect world,
Yeah,
of course,
for
you would do
sure.
all four facades, so.
Mr. Lockyer, any?
No, it's just a little hard to read this presentation.
Mr. Locke, your microphone.
Thanks. Yeah, just the same comments we've had. I think sounds like we're ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I think.
So I'll just make a motion to continue this item to see in the next time we see it, the comments that have been made, and we'd also like to see a color that's been approved by the HOA and the neighbors. I guess that is the HOA, so that we can see it all in context, incorporated into the drawings, renderings, et cetera, so we can know what it is that we're approving. A second from anyone?
Second. Oh.
Yeah, just wanted to clarify, that means corrected, updated drawings that accurately reflect what's being proposed.
Yes. Implied, but it's not stated as such,
Yep.
yes. I'm sorry, did you second?
I did second.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, super, thank you. Moving along to item number 4, application from Radio PS Properties LLC. If we could get the staff report, please, when you're ready.
And we would also invite Mr. McCoy and Mr. Dosey to return to the table.
Did someone go to grab them? I think,
John went to get
okay,
John.
great.
Thank you, Vice Chair. So once again, the AEC reviewed this project on June 4th of 2008, and you asked for several revisions. And I'll go through those quickly here. One was to reduce the height of the building, flip the building so the parking lot is on the north side of the new building, change the service door to a roll-up door, simplify the landscape plan, railings along the front entry to be eliminated, continue the elevation scoring on the rear, a canopy design of the doorway to be reconsidered, use pavers or stamped concrete for bay parking spaces, reduce the bulkiness of the parapet, and then provide a streetscape exhibit. So what you have before you today is a reduced building in height. It is now 28 feet 2 inches, so they've lowered it 2 feet 9 inches to the top of the parapet with a floor plate of 11 feet each inside instead of 13. The proposed site plan building configuration, if I go to a site plan here, they are keeping the parking lot to the south. They have not agreed to flip the building and as the AEC had recommended. The service door, let me flip to the elevation. The service door has been changed to a roll-up door, and the canopy over the front entry has been changed to a flat canopy instead of a sort of a half-barrel canopy. They're using pavers on the, which is up in the left or right corner on the parking area, the bay parking. And they're adding scoring to the rear elevation, which is the bottom drawing. There is a cross-section showing the new proposed floor plate heights at 11 feet. Elevation of the trash enclosure. The landscape plan has been revised to remove a lot of the plants that were, AC had recommended there was too much of a variety of plants, so they've been reduced to several plants that can withstand the heat and the wind out in that area in the north end of town. So they have Palo Verde trees that will provide shading of the parking lot in all the fingers, and also a few palms and in a lot of boulders and rocks and rubble and inert material instead of green landscaping. So this will, this is a major change from when the AEC saw this at the last meeting. There's also a parking lot lighting plan. And then the AEC requested a streetscape showing this building and relative to the buildings on both sides. So the middle slide shows the building that's to the south, which is a metal building that is a car storage lot. It is 1 story, but also reads as a 2-story building. And then the proposed parking lot in the middle with the new building to the right, and then the existing cannabis cultivation facility that's on the very end of the street. So once again, here are some photographs that show the metal building to the left and then the stucco building to the right. Another picture of the lot. So that concludes my report. Staff is recommending approval. It has been revised to meet the requests of the AAC. And the applicant is here.
Thank you, Glenn. Questions for Glenn from the committee? Let's start here.
Glenn, they're providing a lot more parking than what's what's required. And a lot of what they're proposing backs directly onto the street. Does that comply with our parking options, that they can pull those spaces right onto the street?
Right, yes. Bay parking is a common condition out there. You'll see it in this slide. The stucco building has bay parking, and you'll see across the street there's bay parking. So it is a common condition in that industrial park area.
Thank you.
I think Member McCoy had a hand up. No? Okay. Anybody else? All right. Thank you, Glenn. If we could have the applicant come up and join us, take a seat here. And give us, please, your name and address and any presentation you would like to add to Glenn's previously delivered information.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lawrence Gordon, address 1207 West 112th Street, Los Angeles, California, 90044.
Thank you.
Lawrence, why don't you talk about the project?
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, I wasn't present during the last meeting, but I did get a staff report, and I just tried to implement everything, most of the recommendations from the last report, with minimizing the landscape, reducing the height of the building, providing the buildings adjacent to the proposed building so we can get a concept of how everything blends in. Also adding the bay door out front, the roll-up door rather than the bay door. The only thing that we didn't do was to switch the building, and we just felt it would be better to try to keep since the use is similar to the building that's next door, to try to keep those right adjacent to each other. And then also, I think the color schemes are very similar and things like that. And to, just to try to keep the uses together, because on the other side, I know it's a car storage, and just felt it was a little bit weird to separate the use to that side rather than keep it on the same side.
Great. Thank you. Before I ask you to get out of your chair, anybody from the public here to offer any comment on this item? One in the back? Okay, I'm sorry, I lied. I'm going to ask you to vacate your chair for just a moment and ask this gentleman to come up and please give us your name and address and take up to 3 minutes to share with us your thoughts.
My name is Robert Heimbaugh. I'm a resident of Palm Springs, and it's not a comment, it's a question. One of the things that many of us who are residents at the north end of the town are experiencing is the wafting of the aroma of the cultivation of marijuana, of the cannabis. And I'm wondering what the applicant is doing to prepare the stopping of the wafting of that aroma from going into the neighborhood. I'm aware it's happening in some other parts of the city. There's a restaurant in the central part of the city that's losing customers because there's a grow facility right next to it, and the aroma is going in and it's ruining his business. And I don't want that to happen to other businesses in the north end of town or any place in town. And I certainly don't want that to become a major issue for residents in the city, which it's becoming. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for your comments. The question we will come back to with we have one more. I'm sorry. Thank you. Please give us your name and address.
Will do. Paul Henriksen, Palm Springs North End, chair of the Upper West Side Neighborhood Organization, which is adjacent to the Desert Highland Gateway Estates neighborhood where this is proposed. Similarly, as Bob just expressed, that has become an issue already in the North End, and mitigating the off-gassing of the cannabis from grow facilities is important, just as in your previous project that you were talking about, how lighting on an outdoor patio would be aiming down at some neighbors and you don't want them to be affected by that. So that's lighting and also visual, but smell is another important sensory. And there are times when the neighborhood already smells like skunk. And this is going to be adding more to it. So the materials and the equipment that are used in this facility, including their ventilation systems and so forth, I think it's really imperative to consider how do those trap the off-gassings of the cannabis. The area is quite concerned. We're also, Bob is my partner, and we're both the chairs of Neighborhood Formation Support Committee for 1PS. And as we visit the various neighborhoods,
we hear this, including already from many of the neighbors in the Desert Highland Gateway Estates neighborhood and other neighborhoods in the area. So it is very important in our area. Thank you.
Great. Thank you both for your remarks. Anyone else on this item? All right, seeing none, please rejoin us, and we will have some questions for you, and perhaps one of those will be to address the concerns from the neighbors there. Anybody from the committee have specific questions?
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to keep on
Yes.
jumping in. I don't
That's
usually
okay.
talk this much during meetings. On the issue of odors from cannabis facilities, with the change to the city's zoning regulations for cannabis facilities back in December of 2017, one of the requirements that came into place was a conditional use permit requirement and also a CEQA review for both cultivation and manufacturing facilities. And so as part of that, what will happen is we will address those under a conditional use permit. And while we appreciate the concerns that were brought up today, AAC typically doesn't address such issues as operation. However, when the conditional use permit goes before the Planning Commission, that would be the appropriate time for the Planning Commission to place conditions of approval relative to odors and referring back to our ordinance on the requirements there. So I just wanted to make sure for the public and for the applicant and for the AAC that everyone's aware that a conditional use permit for this facility will be coming forward if it, let's see. Oh, it's been filed, okay. And so we will be able to address that under the conditional use permit.
Great, thank you, Flynn. I wasn't aware of that.
Absolutely.
Excellent, okay. So outside of that, questions for the applicant, please.
I'm the one that made the comment last time about moving the building to the south so that it's next. But now that I look at your overall elevation, I can see there's a 6-foot wall separating that building, so it makes perfect sense that you're leaving the building where it is.
Great.
Anyone else? Mr. Rotman?
Yeah, can you tell me what kind of roll-up door you're proposing? In the overall elevation, it looks like it's similar to the doors on the building next door.
Yes, it's going to
Okay.
be
And
similar to
is it a
that.
residential quality door? Or
It'll be commercial quality.
commercial quality? So the little panes are not glass?
No,
It's a
no,
solid.
not at all. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Oh, back over here.
Why are you providing so many more parking spaces than required? Are there a lot of employees in a facility like this?
No, the reason for the additional parking is ownership wanted to leave flexibility for future change of use. Let's say 5 years down the line, they want to do commercial or industrial uses that are allowed within the zoning. They wanted the flexibility to be able to have the parking to accommodate it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. McCoy? No? Mr. Dozy?
No questions.
John? No. Okay, thank you very much.
Could I make a comment just in relation to the recommendations of the people? When we originally designed the building, one of the thoughts were of the aroma and the smell, you know, because of course we've been in the area and we smell what they smell. And one of the things is with the designs, all of the openings are off a hallway that aren't directly off of where the grow will actually be happening. So that was one thing we implemented in the design, was just to limit the number of openings and then to provide openings where it's just an open hallway and no grow will be taking place there. And also we're going to be doing insulated panels. So it's going to be a metal building, but it will be well insulated, which will help to keep the aroma in.
Okay, super. Thank you for that.
No problem.
And thank you for your
Do I have to-
remarks.
Yeah.
Please. Okay, comments from the committee on this application? Should we start down there, Mr. McCoy?
I think the landscape plan, the simplification of the plan is greatly improved based on what is actually existing out there. This integrates with what's going on. It's simple, it's clean, it's got some trees, it will have some softening effects. It's a rough climate out there. For industrial, I'll go with it. The only thing I noticed is that in the lighting plan and the landscape plan, there are trees and lights in approximately the same locations. So that the planting can be adjusted so that the trees don't have to be continually cut back and can actually be allowed to grow. I know they will choose lighting over trees in the long-term maintenance.
Thank you. Mr. Rotman?
I think the changes that were made to the overall project have been very positive, and yeah, I think it's good.
Super. I'll go over to Mr. Dozy next.
My comments are. I'll just speak loud. My comments are regarding the landscaping. If you look at the landscape plan, it shows the diameter of the Palo Verde trees. It looks like it might be 6 feet. So I would request that the applicant show the trees at the proper diameter, at least 20 feet in diameter. We know how large those Palo Verdes get just looking at our own parking lot out here. And I think that'll also reduce the number of trees that'll be needed along the perimeter there, once he shows them at the proper scale. Also, that he could then center the trunks of the trees on the striping of the parking line, so that the trunk falls in between the cars rather than in front of the bumper of the car. And then I also would recommend, or as an option, they could downsize the deer grass from 15-gallon to 5-gallon. It's a fast-growing plant, and a 15-gallon plant isn't going to achieve anything better than the 5-gallon. And that's my comments. Thank you.
Super. Thank you. Mr. Lockyer, anything?
Just seems like it's in harmony with what's going on out there, so I don't have much comment.
Super. And Mr. Jakeway?
Just a couple things. On the facade or the soffit around the top of the building, on the south side of the building, it has a 2-foot overhang. There's no overhang on the north side or the west side, and it looks like on the east side it's about a 4-inch overhang. I don't see any reason to do that 2-foot overhang on the south side. I think maybe use the same smaller overhang that you have across the east side and just let that wrap the building. And then regarding the landscape plan, there's 5 Italian cypress. I think those are kind of odd for the rest of the landscape. I think they could just be eliminated.
Okay, thank you. I didn't miss anybody, did I? Okay, good. I agree. I think it looks much better, much more in harmony now with the buildings around it than it did before. I really appreciate all the listening to the suggestions that the AAC made previously. Would anyone that gave the bulkiest remarks care to make a motion and decide whether or not you want those to be conditions or just recommendations? Go for it, Mr. Jakeway.
I'll make a motion for approval. The comments I made about the overhang, they're just comments, recommendations, so not a requirement. But I would suggest that you remove the Italian cypress. But other than that, I think you've made some great improvements, and I recommend approval.
Do we want to get a second and then see if there are any amendments?
I'll second the motion.
Any amendments?
Can we make an amendment to replace the Italian cypress with some species of tree? It doesn't have to be 1-for-1, but something. Is it a little wider canopy than the cypress?
How are you with that amendment?
Accepted.
And you?
Agreed.
Okay, any additional amendments?
The amendment that the trees be placed as Tom suggested at the
You're okay with that?
lines.
Sure, approved.
I assume you are?
Yes.
Okay.
In agreement.
Does that cover the amendments? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Okay, thank you very much. And we move along to item number 5, an application from Woodbridge Pacific Group LLC. If we could get the staff report on that, please, when you're ready.
If you'll give us just a minute to get the PowerPoint up.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the AAC, once again. So, this item was first presented to the AAC on July 2, 2018. And at that time, I gave a brief background of this project. So for the benefit of those that weren't here at that meeting, this is the second phase of PDD. So in the last meeting, I gave a background to remind members of the AAC that Planned Development District requires two approval phases. So the first phase is the preliminary, and then the final phase is the final PD, in which a finding of conformance to those design elements that were approved in the preliminary stage are incorporated into the final development plans. I also reminded the AAC that unlike most other PDD that I will bring before you, the Miralon has its own specific development standards and design guidelines. So in the package that were provided to you on July 2nd, we included copies of those approved design guidelines. So hopefully, I'm thinking that you either have them or you know what they are. All right, so, but I do have extra copies with me of the design guidelines. So if you want to.
Yeah, I know we have two members here that did not receive it because they weren't at that meeting. So if at least those two could get it, that would be great.
All right.
Thanks, Edward.
And also, in the package that was sent out to you last week, I included copies of the previous staff reports to help us as a reference guide as we review the resubmittal today. So without going too much into that, we spent a considerable amount of time in the review on July 2nd. So I also want to emphasize to the AAC members today that I do want us to focus on those items and the recommendations and comments you made at the last meeting. So beginning from the first page of today's memo, we enumerated those comments and the recommendations made by the AAC. Staff also provided you with 4 conditions in the last meeting. In reviewing the resubmitted plans, they have incorporated all those, they have addressed all those concerns, especially with the focused lots and the revision to some of the elevations that we thought were a little weak. So you, again, looking at the memo before you, you have several comments that were made by the AAC, concerning landscaping, the street plans, detail of fence, the fencing, and the enhancements that you had recommended on the elevations, including the color palette that you had some comments on. All of those have been addressed by the applicant. So beginning from the second page of today's memo, I enumerated all these revisions that's been made to the resubmitted plans. And consistent with the directions that you gave, there were changes made to the designations of those elevations. So now, not only are they referred to by elevation A, B, or C, but they have been given names corresponding to the defining characteristics of each elevation. So, for instance, you have the Wexler, you have Cody, and the Goretta. So those are all included in your package, and I'm hoping that that will at least assist in simplifying the review of the resubmitted items. So on the exhibit that you have on the board includes the site plan. You saw this the last time. Again, the overall plan, or the overall site plan, so this is the overall plan of the Miralon development. And the 44 lots that's been proposed for final development plans by Woodbridge are these shaded lots to the south of the site. And this is just the overall plot plans. You've already seen those. And these are just the typical lots and plots of the homes on the lot. You saw this the last time, and they are also included in your package. This is a section that depicts the heights. And so I remember those are asking for a street tree plan. So this is new. This has been, the revisions included these. This is a continuation of that. And then this is the wall and the fence details that you also asked for the other time. And then, of course, we ask for an enhancement on the focused lots. Recall the focused lots are those lots on intersections or the more visible areas of the site. And then there have been improvement on the landscaping in front of each lot. And these are the revised elevations. So as I was mentioning, instead of just the letter describing each elevation, you can now see the corresponding names of the defining characteristics of each elevation. So I will let the applicant come forward and make additional presentation and to talk more on the revisions that have been made. But I just want to emphasize again that today's meeting should be focused on those items that were recommended at the last meeting. In staff's review, most of those items have been addressed, and the conditions and recommendations given have been incorporated into most of the plans. Again, this is a final plan development district application, so your recommendation would be to the Planning Commission for approval. If you have any questions, staff is here before the applicant comes before you. I also have the revised color chart. Mr. Chair, do you have those here? Okay, so So, Mr. Chair, that will conclude my staff report. For now, I'm available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Edward. Questions for Edward from the committee? Hearing none, we will ask the applicant, Mr. Cunningham, I assume. Thank you for waiting patiently. Welcome back.
Thank you.
And we'll ask you to add
Do you want us to go to your own?
to Edward's presentation.
No, it's all right.
It's Todd Cunningham, 75417 Spyglass in Indian Wells. We're happy to be back here for the revised presentation. We did. We did attempt to address the comments that were received at the last meeting. One was the street tree plan. So we do have a street tree plan now that delineates where trees would go to try and not block the architecture and the like. We did enhance the landscaping on the focus lot on the corner, as Edward said. And then we looked pretty hard at the elevations, and I'd like to just go through those briefly.
Yeah, we can access you. So
Can't get mine? Okay. So this is the street tree plan, and it's just got one tree per house, primarily in between homes, so that, and off to the side, so you're not blocking the elevation of the homes, the non-garage elevation portion of the home. And then, so I hopefully that addresses the concern that we had last time. We also, one of the things we heard was to try and vary the street scene as much as we could In particular, on the east side of the street, we have homes that have pools in the front yard and therefore have privacy walls around those pools in the front, versus the homes on the west side, which the pools are in the rear of the home, so they don't have the privacy wall. So as to the homes on the east side with the privacy wall in the front, we went to 3 different patterns on the block. One is a stacked masonry wall, linear, 4x16, the square, and then a staggered traditional block. So each elevation would have a particular block pattern to the front of those homes. So the A and the B and the C would each come with a different block wall on the front of the home, and then you can see that the gates are a little bit different. Some of the other things we did to try and address that side, or all the homes, is what we showed before on the driveways, is a combination concrete and pavers, and it was all one pattern, basically like this, although the pattern, the pavers were a little bit narrower. In an effort to try and vary the street scene, we adjusted the pavers so that they'd be a vertical, horizontal, square, and the like. So we came up with 3 different patterns on the driveways of the combination concrete and pavers to try and mix up the street scene. I think that would be pretty effective, and I think it would look good. These are just our model homes. As far as the elevations, the dominant feature on in the design guidelines, which I think I can get to that page. Oops. I think it was page, what, 45? Do you remember where the typical elevations were in here? Might be page 19. Sorry. Yeah, page 19. As far as the A elevation, what the dominant feature that we saw was the horizontal and the vertical planes intersecting. And we didn't probably do as good enough job the first time around. So what we did is we included a consistent horizontal plane that comes across the front of the house, albeit it jogs back from front. It's not a constant plane, but the horizontal plane, that horizontal linear element is constant now, and before there was an eyebrow here and something over here. So now we have this plane and then the vertical element that crosses those and creates that vertical horizontal intersection, similar to the 2A design guideline that we're trying to achieve. As to the 2B, what we see is corner windows, and there's actually rivulets in the stucco on the example that's shown in there. And so these are rivulets, which is a stainless steel C-shaped element that scores the stucco, and that further gives that house a different look compared to the other homes. And then on the C elevation, the dominant feature is the massing that you see in the top front view. And it's hard to get that massing on the one story, but that's the nod to that element, to bring that more massive entry or window area on the front of the house. And then you can see that the walls are all different shapes, or different style block, excuse me. And we can go to, and then you can see that all the garage doors are different. So we're trying to get as much variation as we can into what otherwise is a 40-foot wide house with a 20-foot wide garage. So we don't have a lot of elements to work with there. You can see again, this is just a different plan 2. And then plan 3, when we go across the street where the pools are in the backyard, you don't have the front courtyard walls, and yet you still have the scoring, the corner window, this element on the Cs, and then the horizontal line here, as well as the vertical element that bisects it. And then as to color, there's quite a bit of discussion about color. So what we've done is we brought the colors to where the variation in color on different elements isn't as contrasting as it was before, and there's not the heavy dark color in the color palette that we had, so that the color differences are a little softer. And I have Ann Matson here that can speak to the colors. I have Jamie Walton here, our landscape architect, and then Samir Hanoush, our architect, to take any questions that you might want to have. And then the Plan 4 is a two-story, as we spoke of last time, and it has the same kind of corner window element here in the scoring, and then the horizontal and the vertical elements here that are crossing. And remember that two-story element is set back from the front of the house quite a ways because of some setback restrictions. Variation in the garage doors, and also that, remember that the driveways are all going to be varied now as a combination between concrete and pavers. And then these are just the floor plans. So certainly could answer any questions as to the architecture that we've now brought forward. So I think we've come a long way in terms of modifying the architecture to be more consistent with the design guidelines that have been presented to us. So that's what I have, and as I said, we have our architect, our color consultant, and our landscape architect here to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cunningham. We'll see if we have anybody here from the audience that would like to make a comment on this item. Seeing none, let's move to Q&A. Anybody?
I was hoping that the landscape architect could just give a brief discussion of the typical designs that are presented. There's a formal design and informal area.
Jamie Walton, 1793 West Arrow Highway, Upland, California. So you're looking at the last page, 5 of 5, on the conceptual typical front yards?
Jamie, is your microphone on? Is the green light on?
Yes.
Okay, there it is. Good.
What is your question?
On sheet number 5, there's on the typicals, it has architectural planting with secondary tree, architectural planting with accent trumps, and then informal secondary plants. And then below that, there's a pretty extensive plant palette. So I'm wondering how you envision, with the symbols and diagram represented, which plants will be used, and if you can give us an idea of what the informal planting might consist of versus the formal planting.
This is essentially a reproduction of what was given to us in the design guidelines. So the last go-around, we went through with the trees and specifically called them out on the overall tree plan. And so we've placed everything. We didn't have a huge variety of trees we can use per our tree plan in here. As you move into the shrubs, each house is going to be handled a little bit differently, where some of them are going to be more formal stepped planting and some of them will be more informal planting taking from these. We haven't specifically called anything out because everything is a little bit in motion right now as the houses change. And then as soon as we have that all solid, I think the last time we said it'd be coming back for a final approval on the landscape plans, wasn't it?
So at that time, then you'll be specifying which varieties.
Exactly where it goes, yeah. Exactly
Okay.
which one goes where.
Great.
But right now, this is what we're choosing from, and then we'll plug it in for each elevation.
Okay, and within this, let's say the informal design, I'm envisioning that's going to be more of a random desert style.
Right, definitely more informal, a little,
Okay.
not as structured.
And will there be any boulders included within the informal design?
Right now, I am not specifying boulders.
But there could be boulders or some mounding or some.
In past projects that we've done in the desert, we've come up with quite a few boulders. So they're pretty
I'm just thinking it might
ample to
complement
incorporate.
the informal
Yes.
design. Okay, thank you.
I think there's an abundance of boulders that might need to be moved from another project, South Palm Springs.
That was our mining operation, not a grading operation.
Thank you, Tom. Anybody else? Please, Member Jake Wade.
The shade structure that's incorporated on a number of these, on the previous submittal, were those steel structures and steel columns, and now it's a stucco
Now
roof?
it's a frame attached to the house with steel
Okay,
columns.
So we asked for you to attach it, which you've done.
Right.
So now as I look at the shade structure, it's quite thin. I
Uh-huh.
assume it's a solid roof.
It is.
Are those just gonna drain over the fascia, or is there is there a bit of a curb that the water will be contained in those roofs and somehow drain so that it
They'll be-
doesn't run down the face?
They'll be focus drained. They actually have a very flat hip on top.
So like slope to a scupper and then?
Right.
Thank you.
Member Ottman?
On the Wexler elevations where you have all the reglets, is it just on the front elevation or does it return on the sides?
It's front here and returns back to the house here, and it just returns a certain distance to the back.
How
It
far
doesn't
back
wrap
does
the
it
whole
go?
house.
Good.
Let me see.
Oh, thank you, I missed that.
I
Thank you.
think there's some,
I was just looking at the color.
I'd have to, let me see. Yeah, we just did this, we just did the colored A elevations, not the other ones, but if we go back, I can get into the, there.
There it is, on the top.
Yeah, you can see it wrapped there, and then you can see it. Let me see.
Next slide.
Thank you. So it just wraps around a little bit around the front, and to the side.
How deep are those grooves? Because they're basically grooves that are like
Quarter inch. This little C channels. Yeah. It's not a heavy line. It's just, it's only about a quarter inch deep.
And then it won't get filled in with stucco when the
No.
stucco gets applied.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Actually stainless steel.
Okay, the only question that I had was, I noticed in some of the elevations that you're using some plantings that I didn't see in the landscape plan, like Joshua trees and things like that. I just wanted to know if there was a plan to introduce those, or if those are just to make it pretty.
Yeah, those were put on there without the benefit of the landscape plan. So our architect here, so we can clean that up.
Okay.
So that we'd be consistent with the landscape plan.
Great, thank you. I mean, I like them, but they're probably not going to work. Okay, any further questions for Mr. Cunningham or his team? Okay, thank you
Okay,
very
thank
much.
you.
Comments? All right. Member Rotman.
I like the direction that they've taken with the, addressing the variety on the street. But I'm still having some issues, particularly with this wall that kind of defines the, separates the garage from the entries, where it's just kind of an add-on. And they've chosen to sort of, to separate it from the actual garage wall by whatever, 6 inches or something, so that it's distinct. But when I go back to what I envision the design guidelines sort of set out for the examples, that plane should carry all the way back to the entry. And so I'm struggling with that. I'm struggling with that. I'm also kind of struggling a little bit with the reglets. I think they're okay, but I don't think they're necessarily true to the guidelines. And I think the 2-foot return is not necessarily, as you experience it from the street, I don't think you're actually going to, it's really going to, I mean, it's going to look kind of cheap, sorry for the word. So I almost would rather see no reglets and keep it simpler and maybe do something with color than have it just kind of have this facade treatment and return 2 feet back on the sides. So, thank you.
Member McCoy, anything specific?
I totally agree with Member Rotman. Both of those things caught my eye, but the reglets especially, I think it makes it too busy. Having worked for Don for years, I can tell you he would have just gone from the 2 corners up and back and done it a different color. So I think to simplify that a lot might be a better solution than having such an intense pattern of reglets.
We could eliminate the vertical elements and just keep it horizontal.
If we could have comments on the microphone, please.
Thank you.
At your request.
Yes, sure. Come, yeah. Why not?
Yeah, we could eliminate the vertical elements and do horizontal and space them a little bit further apart. But that element is on the design guideline. You just have to look close. But those reglets are on there, and that's where we picked it up from. Again, trying to create variation also in the street. But if we eliminated these vertical elements and just kept it horizontal, and we could spread them out a little bit more so it wasn't as busy. I tend to agree with you. I think it's busy.
Thank you. Thanks. Any comments?
Maybe, and while you're close by, I think it's just feeling a little bit busy to me with the different types of block walls or masonry. Can you talk a little bit about how they marry up one lot to another? And in other words, how was the selection made from selecting one type of masonry and running bond or stacked bond and size and height and material? I also, before you answer that, I didn't get the third, which was the uppermost. You said just a regular block, but was it a slump stone? Was that okay? It's a precision block. Color.
Everything's precision in a typical gray color. So this is, we're using, because we're trying to have this defined horizontal element bisected by the vertical element, we chose the 4-inch, 4 by 16 inch block there that tends to be more linear. And then in the B, we chose the 8 by 8, and then in the C, we have the stack.
So, yeah, maybe walk me through a little bit on the site plan, how those plans marry up next to each other on the site, if you could.
So we have 3 elevations. Let's see. So this is that's a C, that's an A, that's a B, that's a C, A, C, B, A, C. So we try to mix the street scene up, and which with each elevation type, whether A, B, or C, it would get the elevations would have a consistent block pattern. A B elevation would have a consistent block, and a C elevation would have a consistent block pattern. So along the street, you're getting A, B's, and C's mixed in. It doesn't go A, B, C, A, B, C, A, B, C, but we try to mix it up.
So the 3 houses in a row, 3 different block patterns in a row?
Correct.
6 houses? would be-
Well, let me just pick out one in here. So there's a B, a C, an A, a C, a B, A, C. So essentially you get 3 different block patterns with every 3 houses, or within 6 you'll get 2 of each.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a comment that came directly out of the last meeting, that we were showing the same block pattern on every wall, and it was vary it, come up with different block patterns, try and vary the street scene along with, and then we address the driveways too to mix them up.
Okay. I'm still gonna say it feels still a lot to take in there. A lot of different patterns and textures going on. Feels busy to me. I appreciate that was a comment at the last meeting. To vary it a bit.
Yeah, it was specifically to come up with several different block patterns.
And alter them on every lot.
Well, there's some of them that are actually side by side.
That's what I'm hoping.
Yeah, there's I can read this right. That's a B, A, C. So it goes A, B, C, A, C, B, A, C. This is a C and this is really, I can't read that. That's an A. So, I mean, we could pair them up, but in the interest of trying to actually make it more varied, we didn't do that. Let's see this row.
So perhaps that would be a comment
could
that
be,
you would suggest, some pairings here and there.
Yeah, there's a C, there's a C. That's a B, that's an A, C. A, C. I mean, they're not ABC, ABC, ABC. But we could move them around a little bit so that there might be 2 Bs next door to each other. Different floor plan.
Is that your intent, or with the varying of the materials, or are these materials specific to the architectural style of that variation of the particular home? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to help you along with that and come up with some scheme or something in a simpler way that deals with the site wall separately from the architecture, and some variation at the same time as it feels a little chaotic. And
Well, that's a different direction than what we had last time. So,
Does anybody else have a
think
similar
so.
comment?
I think it may be a different direction, although well, I'll let other people address that, but I feel like what I've heard before, and as a similar comment, is looking for variation, but not completely. I haven't seen it in Sitewall, so it's new to me. I'm taking it in.
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on the variation without creating chaos theory?
I think that Sean's comments are just kind of a variation on what Maria was saying
Mhm.
about the different patterns, but I agree that maybe it doesn't have to be quite so varied, that maybe we do have 2 in a row that have the same pattern, and then you switch. I was gonna comment that all the garages are on the same side, can you flip them, but then I remembered because of the 0 lot line situation, we can't
Right.
do that. But I think maybe to not go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, you know, if you go 1, 2, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3, 3, something like that.
Well, it's not the floor plan necessarily, it's the elevation.
And I'm meaning with the elevation.
Yeah. And we can disconnect the type of block from the elevation. So we could ignore the elevation of the house and just look at the street scene of the block patterns.
That's what I was going to suggest. Maybe it's the block wall gets disconnected, or the front door color gets disconnected to help reduce some of the chaos
Yeah.
factor.
It's just when you're trying to, she's going to drive her nuts.
The insanity
All the
begins.
permeations you're talking about. But when you're selling a house and you're trying to disclose to a buyer, well, this is the kind of block you're going to have in the front of your house. You're going to buy the 1A and it comes with this kind of block. When you start mixing things around, it gets confusing for the buyer. Even.
And the requests will begin. And
Yeah, it's like, well, I don't like that block. I want this block.
Maybe
And
it's simpler to pair them.
It's easier if you pair the block up with the elevation type, and then that ends the, because I'm going to get a question. They all want the square 8-inch block. We'll have 5 in a row square 8-inch block because the buyers want that over something else. And so it rather than, as I'm thinking about it, rather than disconnect the block from the elevation, if we just mix the elevations around so that we didn't go boom, boom, every third house is different. We could put 2 B elevations next to each other and take the street scene and not make it checkerboardy as to the changes. Is that what you're?
I think so. I think that's getting there. I think if it were me, I would try to sell the architecture detached from the site improvements and create some kind of cohesive whole throughout the development that didn't create 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, 3. There's that kind of choppy. But
We can't use breeze block or those elements because with the pool,
sure.
So it's not
Well, I don't want to
pool legal
introduce a
wall.
fourth either.
I'm sorry?
I wasn't suggesting introducing a fourth.
Okay.
Okay, any other thoughts on that?
Well, along with Sean's comment too, I think there's also the issue with the different landscape styles, the formal and the informal, and how those transition. Does the formal end at the supposed lot line, or does it carry across to the driveway? There's how will those be transitioned if you have so many formals in a row, or one form? We don't want it to look like where somebody had a line of turf and then all of a sudden some next door neighbor put in rock and it ends at the property line. So I think some attention. Then I started thinking, well, do you pair that up with the wall? Because some walls are more conducive to more architectural style or geometric style of landscape, as a backdrop versus an informal. So I think those options have to be kind of studied and figured out how they're going to make those transitions, not only in the walls but the landscape.
Well, it sounds like these are comments that can be captured and passed along as it goes to our friends at planning, at the Planning Commission.
Well, and when we come back in with final landscape plans, we can address that.
Right. Thank you. Any other thoughts or suggestions? Okay, great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
So we have a lot of issues have been addressed. I think we introduced a couple more comments on top of those items. Anybody care to make a motion on? I mean, obviously it's all been captured. We don't have to repeat it all, but if there's anything that we want to make conditional on our approval, those are the things that I'm looking for.
I'll add on what Tom suggested, which maybe the block walls can relate to the landscape, and that some special attention can be paid towards that when we're, the coordination of the landscape and the site walls get thought out.
Mr. Chair, if I could make a suggestion that since we've already, I think the direction that you're going is that we'll bring back the final landscape plan to you.
Mm-hmm.
That should include the front walls to address the concerns of member Logia. So it would be landscape and the walls to come back to you.
I like that. Would that address the concern?
Yeah, but there was is there going to be other stuff on the joints and the reveals, the fry reglet or stucco?
Yes, what we have from your comments is, number one, relative to the reglets, basically to eliminate the reglets and either use color or an offset in the wall surface to distinguish those elevations, if I captured that correctly.
I think before you go on, I think it maybe was suggested to either eliminate them, or Mr. Cunningham suggested making fewer of them and farther apart. Was that something that was also a direction to consider?
Yes, just to simplify the pattern of the reglet so it's much less busy.
And then the other architectural detail is, let's see, I thought I saw something else here. I'm just going back through my notes. Oh, it was on the issue, I believe, on the A elevations with the detail along the garage wall, that it should carry back to the entry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the.
Yeah, that was the other one. Mr.
Yeah, that
Robbins.
was, that extension should be part of the garage wall and not offset from the sidewall, and that maybe the material carries back to the entry.
So it's a full plane of that material or
Yeah.
color, and not just a little piece of it
Right.
sticking out front.
So those were the primary architectural comments, and then, of course, the comments about the wall and the landscaping, with the wall and landscaping coming back to you.
The only thing about the reglet issue, as he simplifies it, it was also about the returns.
Oh, the wrap around the corners.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so my suggestion was either to eliminate the reglets completely, and then you don't have to deal with the return, or if you do one horizontal or two, that you find a logical place for it to end. But returning it just to the 2 foot just doesn't make sense.
Maybe it's open at the end, at the corner, at the actual corner, but doesn't wrap.
And one possibility might be is that they introduce a vertical reveal where the neighbor's fence is, and maybe the reglet dies in at that point.
Hmm. I like that one. Any others? Did we miss anything?
To follow through on the walls and landscape, are we going to look at the driveway surface patterns as part of a cohesive front yard look?
Yeah. So the 3 things that we'd want to see come back with the landscape plan are the landscape tied to the walls, tied to the driveway pavers. Okay, so then we just need a motion. It sounds like the motion is to approve as submitted with the comments that have been captured, and we'll see the landscape and those 3 items contained therein come back.
Let's see, who is the maker of the motion?
Me just now.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Member Rotman seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, super. Anybody opposed? No. Great. Thank you all for bearing through all that with us. It's going to be fabulous when it's finished. Yeah, no kidding. Okay, so that, any committee member comments? No? Flynn, you have anything for us?
We are dark during the month of August, so enjoy your time off. We appreciate your service on the AAC. You all need a vacation, so again, enjoy that. We will be back in September on September the 4th. We are hoping to be back in council chambers, but I cannot guarantee that. We will also be looking to schedule a joint study session with the Planning Commission to go over some of our training again. Although we don't have new members at this point in time, I think it's good to have a refresher on making findings and things like that. So all of our boards and commissions will have some type of a study session during the month of September, and we'll schedule that at that point in time. But again, enjoy August.
On that topic, to piggyback on that for the members that weren't here for the last meeting, we did, the committee did vote to have Maria continue as the chair through the end of the year, and no, not me as vice chair, but we drafted a new vice chair with Mr. Jakeway to begin to incorporate him into the chairing process. No commitment is implied or guaranteed.
We'll have to make sure the minutes reflect that. Mr.
Right,
Jakeway.
right. Since we didn't have minutes yet, I wanted to make sure and share that. And of course, I'll still be here to lend my support through the end of the year, and then we'll see what happens after that. It'd be nice to get some diverse candidates from different parts of town and maybe different backgrounds to join and replace Maria and I. So I think that's the overall goal.
That is the goal of the city
holding off.
council, yes.
Yeah.
May I ask a question?
Mhm.
Flynn, is there a requirement that in this architectural advisory committee, there be a certain number of professionals? And what's the breakdown?
There is, and I'm going to apologize, I can't remember off the top of my head. I believe that we have 3 registered architects, 2 landscape architects, and then 2 other design professionals. And it's not very specific in terms of what that design professional requirement is, other than that.
Right.
But I believe that's the breakdown on our committee
Are they
membership.
required to be a resident of Palm Springs?
Pretty sure.
Yeah, landscape is the
Oh.
only one where we haven't. I remember Mr. Purnell was not a resident of Palm Springs. So that's the one exception that we give. But otherwise, yes, they do need to be residents.
All right, super. We did pretty good. 5:02. Let's close it.
You did an excellent job today. There was a lot of work.
There was a lot
In a
there.
very short amount of time, so I appreciate that.
All of you. Appreciate that.